everybody and welcome back to my channel. Happy New Year to you all. So today, as I know you all love a sew along, I'm going to do another sew along, but I am still on a baby clothes mission, so I thought that I'd do a baby clothes pattern. Now my go-to place to get baby patterns from is Brindille and Twig. Now I think they're an Australian or an American pattern house. I think Australian pattern house, and they mainly do children's and baby clothes. And today I thought that we'd make a cute little onesie with the feet, because I was very cautious about doing things like this because I always thought that they were a lot harder than they are, but actually now that I've done this pattern a couple of times, I love it. So I've just been making some plain coloured cotton jersey ones, and I thought that you could watch me make it, because in case you also are a bit scared of trying some baby patterns, I'd highly recommend Brindille and Twig anyway, but I just thought that we'd sew it together and then you can see that it's not as difficult as you may think. I should point out that Brindille and Twig are a PDF pattern company, so I did have to print out all my pieces and put them together, but they're really straightforward, and because they're PDFs you obviously buy them and get them instantly, which I find really handy, especially if I need to, not that I ever desperately need to make baby clothes, but if I'm, you know, feeling it and I can get one there and then I will. Also, they do photographed instructions, so I find that quite useful, although it doesn't look as nice. I find photographed instructions really easy to follow, because obviously it's going to look exactly like what you're doing rather than like a drawing, so that's another bonus. And actually they're relatively easy to follow, and Brindille and Twig Pattern House have very clear instructions, very clear pictures, and yeah, I just think they're really simple. Well, I say simple, they're simple to follow, and if you are nervous about making baby clothes or kids clothes, then they're perfect really. Also, their size ranges are massive, so you can go from like preemie baby to like a 7-year-old with the same pattern, which I think is amazing. So if my friend wants me to continue making all these clothes, I can just keep making them with the same patterns. I don't have to re-buy them in a different size. Bonus. Right, let's get sewing. Okay, so once you've printed out your entire PDF pattern, you'll have loads of A4 sheets with all the pieces on, and then you just line up the numbers on each one, cut them and then stick them together. And then once you've got these pieces, I've just loosely cut them out so that they're a bit smaller. And then I have, as usual, traced my pieces onto tissue paper. Now I'm being really mean in this video because I'm not doing it very clearly, as I've got white tissue paper on white jersey, which you probably can't see anything at all. And then to top it all off, I'm putting the pieces upside down, because you basically cut the pieces out on the right side of the fabric, so that you can sort of pattern match and things like that. But because mine is plain and I've already cut out one on one side, instead of flipping this whole thing over, I've just sort of flipped the pattern pieces over. So I'm being lazy, but so I'm really sorry that one, it's not very clear, and two, I'm just doing white on white. But basically I'm just going to cut all the pieces out. There's 3 main body pieces, and then there's quite a few little pieces like the feet and the cuffs and things like that. So I'm just going to cut all these pieces out now. Okay, so once you have all your pieces cut out, you should have a lovely array of different things like this. So I've got my back and my 2 front pieces, my sleeves, the foot bases and the tops, the ankle for the shorter leg side, the cuffs, the little gusset, and you need a strip of jersey that it tells you to measure out, depending on what size you're doing, for the binding of where the snaps go on. So the first thing we need to do is get this smaller front piece side, and you're just going to overlock this curved edge here, so I'm going to go do that now. Okay, so once you've got that inside edge overlocked, it does say that it is optional, but you can cut a strip of interfacing, and then if you flip it over to the wrong side, you can attach this interfacing onto that very outer edge very carefully, because then you fold that under and then you top stitch it down. So this just gives it a little more rigidity and sturdiness, and it also really helps with the top stitching. You get less puckering, and it just looks neater. So I'm definitely going to iron this on, although you don't have to have it if you don't want it. So I'm just going to iron this, and then we'll top stitch it down. Okay, so it's not going to be very clear, but I've ironed this interfacing on here, and it's 2 centimeters wide, because you then fold that to the wrong side 2 centimeters. So whatever thickness your interfacing is, it should be that neat line. And then it is a bit fiddly because it's on a curve, but you're just going to pin that in place, and then from the right side top stitch down that very close edge there, and then you sew 2 centimeters in from this very edge, so that you top stitch down the overlocked edge to the back. Okay, so I've got my ballpoint jersey needle in, and I've got some good quality white thread. So you're just going to top stitch this very outer edge first by a couple of millimeters. In fact, I'm doing mine about 4 millimeters. And you're just sewing from the bottom all the way to the top. Okay, so now I've sewn that outer edge, you now need to sew the other side of the placket, which is here. So they're saying 2 centimeters from that outside edge, but just make sure that when you're sewing, you are actually sewing on top of your overlocking stitches underneath, so that you are actually securing this bit down as you sew. Once you've done those 2 lines of stitching, it should look like this from the front. So you have that outer stitching there, and then the 2 centimeter in stitching there. And then from the back, it should just be securing down the overlocked edge all the way down. So I did use a jersey ballpoint needle for sewing this, but not much else. I just used my normal machine. The trick with sewing top stitching things like this, especially with like cotton jersey that's quite stretchy, just take your time. Do not rush it. If it puckers, don't panic. Like, just keep smoothing the jersey flat as you're sewing. Don't pull it, don't stretch it. Just let your machine take it and do all the work. You're just guiding it through and just keeping it. I basically just gently stroke the jersey away as I'm sewing. And on this, it will seem tricky if you're doing it for the first time, because it's on a curve. And that slight curve can mean that the jersey does pucker quite a bit, so just really take your time with it. And once you've done it once, I mean, you're good to go. So all we need to do now is join the shoulder seams. I'm really hoping you can't hear the builders. I know I always say that, but I'm hoping that you can't. So basically, you're just going to join the shoulder seams now. So if you lay the back piece of your Babygrow right side up, and then right side down, place one of your side pieces. You'll know which side it is because you'll have your right sides together, and then the armholes will match up nicely. So that's that side. And then the piece that we just sewed with the button placket on, that's going to go on the other shoulder there. So all we're going to do is pin these, and then I'm going to use my overlocker to join them. Now this pattern does include a 6mm seam allowance, so basically for me that is just my normal overlocking stitch edge. So I just follow the edge with my overlocker, and then that's me done. But you might want to measure it first just in case, because some overlockers are slightly wider than others or narrower, so just double check that first. But all you're going to do now is just join that shoulder seam and that shoulder seam. Okay, so now I have both my shoulder seams sewn. One more tip for you, just as you're overlocking or sewing. Try and keep the garment on the table or up next to you. Don't let it hang down off the table or off the side, because that hanging can stretch out the jersey. So try and keep it all quite high and together rather than letting it sort of like drape off of something, because it can misshape your pieces. And then when you come to sewing the next bit, you may find that it's stretched out of shape. Right, so the next thing is sleeves. So as we would with a top, you're going to open it out with right sides up. Ignore what I just did. Now, if you were sewing a basic t-shirt or a jumper, you've probably done this before, where these two would be joined, so you'd have your neck hole and then you put your sleeves in place here, and that's exactly what we're going to do, except the front piece is open. So just make sure your shoulder seams are pointing towards the back, just for neatness. And then we're going to grab our sleeve pieces. I just need to check which side is the right side. With pale jerseys, it's always really hard to tell, but that is the right side. So, right sides together. There is no, well, as far as I'm aware, I may have not put it on my pieces, but there's no notches. So what I'd recommend is, where you cut them on the fold, in that fold, just do a tiny little notch so you get that center point, and that should line up with the shoulder seams. So you're going to pin that in place, and then this edge here will be pinned to that edge, and this end here will be pinned to this edge. And then, as you normally do with a t-shirt, you're just going to feed and stretch this round and pin it. Don't overstretch it, but you do need it to fit together. So you will need to manipulate it slightly. So do 3 pins first, 1 in the center and 2 in the ends, and then pin the rest in between by slowly feeding it into place. So once you've pinned all that in place, you're just going to overlock very, very carefully all the way around. I have done my pins like this, and I know that's annoying when I overlock, but I tend to find that it holds it in place better, and I just take the pins out one by one before I sew them. So you just need to overlock that edge there, and then we're going to repeat it on the other side. Okay, so once you've attached both your sleeves, you're now going to do the side seams. So I need to fold this right sides together. And once you've done that neatly, you can already see the little tiny baby suit coming together. And then all you need to do after this is pin the side seams from the edge of the sleeve to the armpit and all the way down to the leg. And you do that on both sides with your overlocker again. And then we'll move on to the next step. So I just need to pin this and then overlock it. Okay, so once you've pinned them, that's ready for the overlocker. Just make sure that this armpit seam is lying directly on top of the same seam underneath, so that once that's turned the right way, that all lines up. So yeah, just overlocking and then next stage. Okay, so once you've done both your side seams, you should have a little Babygrow like this. I mean, I'm just going to leave it inside out for now, because the next step, actually I don't know if we need it this way out for the next step, but anyway, just for now, leave it like that, because next you need to make the binding. So all they want you to do to start with is fold it in half lengthways. Is that right? Lengthways? No, widthways, so that the short ends are together, and you're just going to simply sew a little line quite close to the edge just there, so that we create like a binding. Okay, so now comes the fiddly bit. So once you've sewn that little line across, you turn it the right way round and poke it out so that you'll have something like this. Now this end needs to start here. at this neck edge from the right side. So where we did the 2 lines of top stitching, that sits with all the raw edges together there on that very edge. So I'm just going to pin that. Right, so this is quite fiddly. You just need to keep the binding together so that the raw edges are together, and then you're just going to line both raw edges to the raw edge of the neckline and keep pinning it all the way around. Now you're going to stretch it quite a lot, well, I say quite a lot, moderately, until you get to the other edge of the neck, which is this pointed bit. And if I just demonstrate on a tiny bit before I pin all this together. Once you get to this neck edge, you're going to almost cut the corner and do that and then pin it, so that this sharp corner bit you'll take off with your overlocker so that it rounds it off. And then for the rest of that side, going all the way down to the ankle piece, don't stretch it as much. So that can just sit on top of it and just stretch to flatten it, but don't stretch it loads because otherwise the length will go out of shape. So you're just keeping it flat, keeping it together, stretching it to make it neat, and then cutting the corner on the other end of the neck, and then going all the way down to the ankle without stretching it too much. So now I'm going to just take my time and pin all these fiddly bits in place. Okay, so I've pinned the neck bit until I cut the corner there, and then I'm just going to freehand do the last bit because it doesn't need that much stretching. So I'm just going to carefully do this on the overlocker. Now take your time with it because this is quite an important part. So just start at that folded edge and then go all the way along really carefully. Okay, so once you've put your binding on, it should look something like this, and it's definitely looking more like a very cute Babygrow now. So once you've done that, you just need to top stitch your binding down. So the end here where I've knotted it underneath, I don't know if it's going to focus enough on that, tuck that underneath that seam so that the knot will be secured inside of there. If that makes sense. So the knot is underneath the overlooking stitches there. If you tuck that in, then when you flip it over, you can start top stitching from this side really close to that edge, but you're top stitching on top of your overlocking stitches underneath on the main Babygrow, not on your binding. And you're going to do that all the way around. Just make sure that you're sort of gently pulling that away from the main Babygrow so that it's nice and neat and flat underneath. So we're just going to top stitch this now, and then we'll do the next step. Okay, so once you've top stitched that, it should look something like this all the way around. I hope you can see that. So next, it might seem complicated when you're reading the instructions, but it's really not. If you lay your Babygrow out like this, the next step is to join this side of the binding to the other side of the button placket so that you continue this leg on, but you obviously don't want to pin it to the back of the leg. So if you put it over the top, just so you know what you're doing, and then you pick it up and then flatten the back of the leg out so that that's out the way. If you then double check that that's in the right place, so this folded edge of the binding should sit nicely on top of the stitched line of the placket underneath. And then if you just put a pin across there. Now, you don't need to overlock this, but you're just going to do a little straight stitch over that edge to keep it together for the next step. Okay, so it should look something like this with a little line of stitching there. So now, along this line here, you're going to attach the ankle piece. So it's the long rectangle, the little arch cut out of it. Now this arch should sit directly on top of where that binding is, but obviously pointing up because you want the straight edge along the straight edge. So it should look something like that, with the binding going through the arch. So you're just going to join this in place with your overlocker all the way along that edge, and then the ankle piece is attached. Okay, so once that's sewn, it should look something like this. Now you need your foot tops. So that's these funny shapes here. Now this straighter edge, not the curved edge, but the straighter edge, is where you're now going to join the top of the feet to this really high curve here in the ankle. So again, fold it in half and get that center point. I'm just going to snip into that. And you're going to place that right sides together so that that center point is in the center of the foot. And again, you're just going to do 3 first, that point there, then you're going to join that point there to the very, very edge, and then the same on the other side. So you have 3 pins, and then take it to your overlocker, and as you sew it, you're just going to stretch this smaller curve on the ankle out like that as you sew, so that it's straighter, so you can attach that more easily onto that edge there. And then on the other ankle, on the other side, you should already have that piece there, and then you're just going to repeat that on that ankle as well. So it takes a bit of manipulation, but start with your 3 pins first and then go from there. Okay, so we're nearly there now. So there's my little dock feet on the bottom of the onesie. Now if you get your little gusset piece, this now has to join right sides together to the back of the Babygrow. So if you flip this over so that you have your back piece, this has little notches in it from when you cut it out. So you're just going to lay that over the top so that it's in the middle. And again, you're going to use your 3 pin technique here. So pin that bit in the middle, and then this point here needs to go around and join onto the side there, like that. And then the same on the other side. So you just need to sew this on with your overlocker, catching it along the very edge, and then we can do the inseam. Okay, so I've put my little gusset piece into the back. I must say this bit is quite fiddly to do because you're so sort of close to the edge, so I did sort of miss that little point bit there, but I can hide that in the next bit. So if you have it wrong sides out, you're now going to join the inner leg seam, but you're joining the front to the gusset like you did before. So I'd start with the legs first, so you're just going to join those ankle pieces together and put a couple of pins in that end bit. Now it does say to reduce bulk in the ankle, you can have this seam going up and then you can turn the direction of that one going the other way. But I mean, the perfectionist in me likes them all facing the same way. I just think it looks neater. So I mean, it might be a little bit bulkier, but I'm going to keep mine that way because I think it looks neater. So I'm just going to do a couple of pins in this ankle piece. And then basically I do the same approach as you did before on the gusset. Find that center piece where it's marked, and then join that to the center of the inner leg. And once you've got that center point, you can sort of work your way outwards and then carefully sort of join that round. Again, you'll need to stretch it slightly to fit, and then catch those inseams in there. I'm just going to move mine in a bit so that I get rid of that messy point that I missed, like that. And then the same on the other side. And then again, you're just going to use your overlocker to sew this in place. So I must admit that gusset part in the inseam is probably the most fiddly bit of the whole pattern. And I don't really like doing it, but I think the more I do it, the easier it will become. It's just like really fiddly, manipulating the jersey in the right way. Okay, so only 2 more bits to go, the feet and the cuffs. Well, I need to do the press studs, but I won't bore you with those because it would just be a lot of hammering. So all you need to do now is, with the Babygrow right sides in. No, wrong sides out. Wrong side out. Oh, I'm forgetting how to speak. The Babygrow is wrong sides out, and all you do is put the curve of the base of the foot to the top so that that matches up neatly. And then this bit basically stretches round and goes all the way around to the back of the ankle. So again, we're going to do the 3-prong approach, except you're just going to add an extra pin and do the back of the ankle. So if you stretch it to the opposite edge, and then again put a pin in that side, and then wherever the halfway point meets, you're almost just gonna stretch that out so that you can do 2 pins in each side. And again, just make sure that these leg seams point towards the back of the garment, because I mean, I don't know why we always point them to the back, but it just makes everything look really, really neat if you do. So stretch that round. Remember, it's going to be more stretched at the back of the ankle as it goes round, and there's going to be more room in the front where the little tootsies go. So that's literally all I do for the bases of the feet. I just put 4 pins in, and then I just sew around the edge. Just be careful when you are doing the back that this bit is stretchy. I have done it both sole up under the overlocker and then the rest of the Babygrow up, and it's definitely easier to pin it with the sole like that so you get a good shape, but then flip it over and overlock it from this side. I just find it much easier to manipulate the back of the ankle and keep it all flat and neat. So I'm just going to do the 2 feet parts and then we'll do the cuffs. Okay, so the cuffs are very, very simple. You've all done this before if you've ever made a top or anything with cuffs. You're going to fold it so that you join the short ends together with the right sides on the inside. So right sides together, short ends joined together. So I'm just going to overlock down there, and then I'm going to repeat the same. And then once you've got them joined like that, you basically fold them in half lengthways so that they're half the width. So they'll basically look like that. And then you're just going to slip those inside the armholes so that all the raw edges are together, and then you're just going to stitch those in place. Okay, so once you've got your cuffs sewn and folded like so, they should look something like this. So they'll be right sides out, so the wrong sides of the cuff are all together. Now I've slipped my first one inside of my sleeve, and basically all I do is put 2 pins at opposite ends. The first pin joins the seam of the sleeve to the seam of the cuff. Now the seam edge of the actual main body I've got pointing towards the back of the Babygrow, but the seams of the cuff I've got pointing the opposite way. Now this just reduces the bulk in the seam here, because there's obviously 3 layers that I'll have to sew through. So I've kept my main body seam of under the arm pointing towards the back, but the cuff seams are actually pointing towards the front, just so that lies a bit neater. So basically I just, near that seam, I place that under my overlocker, and then I just quickly overlock in a circle, and then I'll do the other one. So I really hope you enjoyed this video and you liked watching me make this adorable little onesie. I'm just really loving making baby things at the moment. They're quick in terms of from like cutting out to a finished garment. They're relatively fast because they're so tiny. They're really fun, they're really cute, and I just really love making them. And they look so professional when they're done, which I really, really like, because you spend ages sort of like top stitching things and making things look all cute and tiny. They just look like they've, you know, I just really love them. So make sure you give this video a thumbs up if you enjoyed it, and if you have any questions about anything that I've done in this video, please comment below. If you recommend any other pattern houses or other baby patterns, please let me know, because as you know, I'm on a baby clothes mission at the moment. So yeah, make sure you subscribe if you haven't already, and I will see you next week for another video. Happy handmade, everyone!